So hello everybody, welcome to this Codurance meetups. My name is Christian, I will be the facilitator today, and Javier will be our guest. Javier is a data engineer at WeFox, and today he will be starting the first part of a series of 3 meetups where we will be together going through all you will need to master Python in your daily basis work. He will be going from testing to patents and architectural design in Python applications, and don't lose the opportunity to register for the next ones. So please give a warm welcome to Javier.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for this kind introduction. As Christian said, my name is Javier Martínez. I'm data engineer. I have been working with Python since 7 years ago. And I have a plan for the session today. So the plan is that everything will be more interactive. So I really want to stress the thing that Christian mentioned before, that feel free to interrupt me to talk, because I expect this to be kind of interactive. Okay, will be, or it will be possible that I will ask some questions, and will be really nice to have some feedback from you. Okay. Okay. As you can see, my screen is split in two. I have the visual code here with the code that we are going to review. Okay, and I have a small presentation. I already said it in the chat, but there is a repository, a public repository in GitLab that I really invite you to go, clone it, and try to work at your pace during the session. Okay. Don't feel pressure. If we are in the second assignment and you have a doubt about the first one, feel free to ask. So no worries, okay? But you have here always the reference of the repository. In the repository, you will find also the slides, or the link to the slides. So first of the 3 trials, the penitent man will pass. So as Christian mentioned before, I have this is the first chapter or the first session of a trilogy, okay? I think there are like 3 important pillars in software development, or for software developers. The first is testing, the second is design pattern, and the third is architecture, okay? So I will have a session focused on each of them, and for me it's kind of a thrilling situation, a situation in which is interesting. We will gain knowledge, and because my hero from the childhood was Indiana Jones and his adventures, this is kind of a tribute, a honor to Indiana Jones. So the goals for this session, nonetheless, is to code happily, to provide value to you and to the community, and to research together. So expect some guidance from me, but you can know more than me. Probably you know more than me in many aspects. So feel free to contribute and interrupt me. Okay, but let's go back to Indiana Jones, because this is the real goal. Feel like Indiana Jones, thrilling, coding, and having this kind of feeling of adventure while working and researching together. Okay, so just to generate a small break from the day, I mean, I had a really long day, probably you too. Let's put the eye on the first trial. So it's like, well, probably you don't listen the sound, but you can play it at home. So it's like Indiana Jones is going to the documentation, like we are going to the documentation, and he's reading and repeating the mantras of the documentation and saying that the test will pass, and if the test will not pass, this will not go to production. Okay, and look back to the boss, into the situation, and it's really dangerous. Okay, this is my daily life. Okay, I don't know yours, but at the office I'm like this. I have to deal with the documentation, repeating dead bodies. Well, that's not always, but what I want to transmit to you is that this is a key problem, okay, and a difficult situation that we should take care of it. Why? Because we reach this point, like Indiana Jones, in which we have to develop to release to production, and we have to be ready. And like Indiana Jones, he kneel at the very moment and jump, and all the tests pass, and it's super cool because he can go to production and continue working. Okay, so this is the first trial, and this will be what we are going to talk about. Maybe not so movie-like, but anyway, will be interesting. So plan for the session, let's review some definitions, okay? We will check also the tools that we have in Python for testing. We will have hands-on on 3 different assignments. And sorry by the word assignment, sounds like the school, but it's kind of that. And let's summarize the session all together, and let's check the take home message, okay? So on testing, okay, testing is really really general word. It's difficult to define to me. I am not an expert in linguistics, but for me, testing is like the act of certifying that something is according to a model, okay? So all of us have been tested at some point in life, in the school for sure, during the job interviews, in the sports, and this has been done for checking from a system that is outside from our mind, that what they expect match the expectation. I mean, what they are testing, so the inner model that they have is matching the outer model, okay? If this is a bit philosophical, please interrupt me, and we can talk about that. So as a personal view, testing is a way of getting feedback about our expectation of a system, okay? So when we are coding, this expectation is that the code that we are programming and thinking about goes through all the specifications that we have, all the behavior that we expect, okay? The lack of testing means that we will not have a prior information on this, so the outcome of something will be out of our control, okay? So this is really personal opinion, but I want to simplify with this. Developing for me must set some expectation on the execution of that software in reproducible manner, okay? So developing software is generating something that works, but also a reference that allows other people and also allows you in the future to understand what is happening within that model, okay? And think about something that has not been tested. Imagine that you have a software that modify an image and you don't test it and you have this outcome. So this will be really bad. So one question that I want to open to you is that most of us, when we are coding, test somehow, okay? It doesn't matter really if we follow a pattern like TDD, but at least I noticed that when I'm coding internally, I'm thinking what I expect from that outcome. And many times I go to the console if I don't know what a function is doing and put a simple input and check the output and check that is correct. I don't know if many of you what comes first, code or test? If sorry guys, I'm not really putting attention to the chat. If is there any question, please?
Yeah, I will tell you. I didn't want to interrupt you, so
okay.
If you want to take some time to answer the questions, just from time to time stop and I will read them and then we can go through them.
Okay, so perfect. So the message here is that all of us, I think, test somehow what we are doing. The problem is that not all of us put or translate that test into code that other people can read and can understand the model. And this is the problem that testing solves. And it's really important because software is changing the whole time and projects are changing the whole time, okay? So it's really important that we develop a tool for other people to understand what we developed in the past, okay? Or develop nowadays, but is external to them, okay? Just this article is from the 1978, really old. This is nothing new. Talking about the convenience of forcing developers to think about possible incomes of the system and how this pattern or this practice improve the quality of software by forcing the developers thinking about corner cases, and so it's quite interesting. But I talk a lot, so let's go to the pre-assignment. Okay, pre-assignment is something that we will do in code, and if you have the repo, there is a branch called pre-assignment. Right now, let's minimize this.
I just shared the link in the chat.
Perfect. So in Python, we have mainly two frameworks for testing, okay? One is in the common library, which is unit test, and the other one probably is the most widespread framework, which is PyTest. There are other like Nose2 and other really experimental and funky, but the most important are these two, and they have nothing special. It is, in my experience, quite similar to the frameworks I have seen in JavaScript, in other communities, in Unit. Unit is, unit test is really similar to Unit or PHP Unit. Okay, but for this session, we will work always with PyTest and another package which is called Coverage, and we will review it together in the code. Okay. So if you go to the code, things that you have to know is that we have a .env. This is not a good practice, guys and girls. Don't do it at home. I just put it because it's a way to import the Python path easily. Okay. Within the pip file, there is a section here with scripts, and they provide an alias to commands. Okay. If I just write pipenv run start, what I'm running is this thing here. Okay, it's just easy to me and less verbose to use this alias instead of the full command. Okay, so within the folder pre-assignment, we have two folders, and this is a personal taste. I like to have always a single folder, and within that the source code and the test that we have. Okay, despite we talked before about something general, the tests that we are going to check during the session are mainly unit tests. Unit tests, to provide a simple definition, are tests that check or address for atomic or really simple feature of the code. Okay. Okay, so the code that we are going to check is this called example.py, and within that we have a single function called replace Indiana. Replace Indiana takes two inputs, a message and a proper name. First of all, count the times that Indiana appears in the message, and a second step, replace the word Indiana by the proper name. And as a result, return the message with the replacement and the count, okay, in a tuple. You can see an example of execution here. The original message is Indiana Jones, I presume, and we want to replace it by doctor. So as before, if we type pip env run start, which is the short way to address this, the output that we are printing here is, instead of Indiana Jones, I presume, we got Dr. Jones, I presume. Okay. And this will be all. But as we mentioned before, if someone needs to understand this will be not so trivial. So that's why we need, as a good developers, as a good practice, to develop some testing. Okay. Just for showing you the frameworks that we have in Python, I made 2 examples. Within the text example .py, we have the next things. Let me crop everything. Okay. So first of all, both frameworks, unit test and PyTest, have algorithm to discover which are the the test files. Okay. For that, we need to put this test underscore before or at the end of a dot file that we want to contain the test. Okay. For unit test, we need to create a class, and the class should start with test and should inherit from this test case class from the unit test library. Okay. If we go to the console and we write pip env run unit test.
Javier, can you make a bit bigger the letters in the console?
In the console, not sure. Like that. Okay. Let me minimize this. Okay. So I don't know if you notice. Can I move this here? Anyway, this is the output of running unit test, and this is the output. Okay. Why this is the output? Because unit test is taking this class and taking all the methods that start with test. Okay, there is one here, and some lines below we have another one here. Okay, and they and unit test is executing it and consider them as a test. Let's go and we will review what is the behavior of the test. Okay. One thing that you will notice, and I think this is also a good practice, not in unit tests, but in general in any language, is to provide a really verbose, really descriptive name to the function that contains a test case. Okay. Because this will not be called so often in the rest of the code. It's a good practice because will make the life of the reader easier. So test given, this is test, this is a mandatory word. So given a text with Indiana, replacement returns text without Indiana. I think without Indiana and using proper name instead. This is even more descriptive. Okay. So I usually split with these 3 comments my functions, my test functions. Usually I write given, I write when, and I write then. Many of you know this, but given are the conditions for the test, when is the execution or what it happens, and then is the output that we expect to have and where we put the assertions that we want to do on the results of the test. Okay. In this case, we will use proper name doctor as before. We will use this code and this piece of test from the Wikipedia. As you can see, we look for Indiana. There are 3 Indiana in the test. Okay, so this will be this test, and when we execute the function that we want to test, we have a section, we have a result test and result count, and we start asserting it. Asserting is comparing the two results, okay? And if they are failing, there will be an assertion exception in Python, okay? So in this particular case, unit test is more similar to unit and other frameworks because the function test case, the class, sorry, test case has itself some assertion methods, okay? So for checking that something is equal to another thing, you use this. There are other examples like assert is not, assert is not in. So we want to assert or check that Indiana is not in the resulting test, and we want to assert in that proper name is in the resulting test. Okay. And this test, according to this, is running properly according to the output. Okay, because we have this test given a text Indiana replacements runs with okay, but we have another example here, test dummy failing test, which is the same situation, but instead of having a 3 here, we have a 0. And obviously, because it's the same original test, it will fail. If we put a 3 here and we execute it again, we will have both tests passing and okay. So this is certifying that the behavior is according to this assertion. Okay. But what is happening? This is a bit dry to our test. So what if we go back to this 0, to this failing test, and we execute pip env run pytest? Okay, this situation is more colorful, please. And what you can see is that we have one fail test, 2 pass, and one special case. Okay, I will talk about that later. So we have 4, isn't it? But before we only had 2 tests. So the good thing about PyTest is that it's able to run also the test cases defined in unit test. So unit test is older than PyTest, and if you have legacy code, probably with some tests implemented, you can run PyTest to also check those tests, but with more verbose, more beautiful outcome. Okay. And not only beautiful, but also providing more information for you to debug. Because, for instance, instead of having the previous fail, we have the assertion error highlighted here in a really nice way in red. Okay. So, as I said, we have 2 test cases within the class of unit test, and we have 2 functions here. The good thing also for PyTest is that a test case doesn't need to be within a class. So we can have just a function, and the algorithm will discover that this is a test case and will execute it in the same way as a test. Okay. So in PyTest, it's also common to group test suites or different test cases within a class. But if you don't want to do it, you don't need to do it. You just need to have a list of functions, and it's perfectly fine. Okay. The structure is pretty similar. Okay. The name could be even the same. And I also have the structure of given, when, then here. But what you will notice is that we don't have these complex assertions that we had before. Okay. Assert is a special word, keyword in Python, and we use it in regular code. So why not using it also for testing? give me a second. Should I
We have
answer,
a
Edu?
question. Yes.
What is the criteria to decide if group up your test in test class or define function without a class? So usually my personal test is to group the test cases by functionalities that they are covering or by classes. No, if you want to test a class, I will mimic that within a test class. But to tell the truth, it's a personal case. We will see that some things, some tools of PyTest framework apply to classes, and it's easier to apply just once to a bunch of methods instead of going function by function. Okay, and if functions are addressing the same functionality, probably you want to apply the same tools to all of them. I don't know if this answers your question, Edu. Will be cool if any of you have a different idea. Please interrupt me. But if not, I will continue. Okay. So far, so good. We have unit test, which is a bit older, and it has some kind of special assertions. They are methods of the parent class. But in PyTest, you can use the regular assert word. So instead of having assert equal result 3, you can just result count equal 3. So it's a logical operator, which is, for me, I can read it much better. Lately, I have been coding in Kotlin, so I have been in touch with the Java community, and they love this equal to and so. So it's a matter of taste. I mean, depends on you, but because I was more trained in this Pythonic way of writing assertions, yeah, I wrote it like that. Jose is laughing. Okay.
Really cool, so, this way. I like it.
You like this way or the Java?
Yes, this way. I like it. It's more,
well, I think I try lately also Jester, and Jester is also with the equals blah blah blah. Yeah. So yeah, Python, more reasons to change, to switch to Python. So cool things that we have in PyTest, the output, sorry, is really beautiful. You have a lot of insight. You have this part here. This summary here is not strictly speaking part of PyTest. Okay, PyTest has like 872 plugins, so the community is really happy with PyTest. And one of the plugins is related with this package I talked before, which is called coverage. And what coverage is doing is which part of the code you are addressing or you are running during this testing. Okay, so which lines are executed during this test. This is kind of important because imagine that you have an if statement and the tests are not entering within that if. So the test within that if will not run at all. So you will not know, okay, if it's going. But we will see that cover could be also tricky. Things that I want to mention also is that PyTest has some cool tricks, which is some decorators, decorators, no, that are really useful, and you can use them to mark a test. Okay, the special case that we have seen before is this one, xfail. So you just import PyTest. You say PyTest mark this test like X-fail. And X-fail is a sorted word of expected to fail. As you can see, the test that we have here is the dummy failing test that we have before, but we don't have it failing. We have it like X-fail. Okay, why? This could happen. I mean, it's a good opportunity. If you know that some tests will fail for sure because you are waiting for the PR of other colleague for Sophia. And hey, Sophia, I will put this test on expected to fail until you change it. So the battery of tests, especially if you are working in continuous integration, will not fail and will not stop your development flow. Okay. One can just, okay, I don't want even to run it. So PyTest also allows you to skip it. And if we repeat the operation, if we repeat the operation and we save, this is important we will have the same result. Okay, one fail, well, not the same, different result. One fail, two pass, and one skip. Okay, so this test didn't even run. And one cool feature of PyTest is that you can use these decorators also in legacy code of unit tests. So if we go to the previous failing test and you say, okay, I don't know what this is doing, but despite this is run or defined under or within the unit test class, I will mark it with PyTest. So the next time we run it, we will have all the tests passing, okay? And we have one skip and one expected to fail, okay? And this is cool. Last thing that I want to show you, yeah, let's try this this command, PyTest report, because if we run pvenv run PyTest, how I call it, PyTest report, yeah. We run the same bunch of tests, but in this case, instead of having a summary of coverage here, coverage library will generate a HTML here. And if you go to the browser and load the index, you will see a summary of what is happening. If you click in the different files, you can see what is happening, okay? 5 lines of piece of codes or executable lines of code are run, 0 lines are missing, 3 are excluded, and 0 partial. Okay, and just to go a bit into the excluded, this mark of pragma that we have here is for telling coverage, please don't take this code in account, okay? Because indeed, this is kind of a manual test and we don't want that the coverage take these lines in account, okay? So these are the tools that we have, okay? So, Javi, you are talking a lot and you are showing us a lot of things, but when we put our hands on the code, okay, now it's time to do that. We review the tools. You have more or less an idea how it works. And let's start with the assignment, okay? And the assignment, in my mind, is something really like a role game, something empirical, practical, hands-on. So we will have 3 situations, okay? First one is the ideal situation for any developer is like you arrive to a company and they give you a brand new project for you from scratch. There is no code. there are only some document specifying what is the goal, and you have clean land for doing what you want. Okay. The second scenario is a bit more complex. Is okay, you arrive to a project. This is even more, well, this is realistic. You arrive to a project where there is no test. There are no tests. Okay, and you need to test or start testing somehow, because of course someone noticed that it's not maintainable to keep the code in that place, and because you are new in the company, they put it in that project to refactor. Okay, this happens. And the last situation is more complex, but not much more. Okay, will be similar to the second scenario, to the second assignment, but with the particularity that we will have the code will have a connection with an external database. Okay, and we will see the implications on how to test that when we have that in the code. Okay. So time for assignment one, start a project from scratch. First of all, move to the, let Git check out assignment one. Okay. Sorry, I changed the name, I discard. Yeah. Okay, here we are. If you move to this branch, there is a assignment MD that probably we can read it better here. Will be kind of the piece of description that your boss sent to you. Okay, it's like, okay, you arrive, your job consists on implementing a handler that perhaps will be later used to upload it as a lambda or whatever. So there is a handler that should be a function that receives two parameters, the event and the content. Okay, this is an example of the content, and the goal is to implement a function that returns a message that is digested or secure hash of the event using this library. Okay. Due to the issues with the GDPR, we will receive only 2 countries, but we have to distinguish these 2 cases. For the German case, we will need to use a length of 32, and for the Spanish company, will be cool to have only 16. And the code should be as robust and testable as possible. Okay. So this is an open forum or competition, not competition, a forum, because many of you, especially the Codurance people, are really well trained, not like people from the underground like me. So TDD is really well in the genetic code of Codurance, and is one of the best practices for developing code from scratch. Okay. Any of you probably can correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is to generate this cycle. Okay. Instead of writing the function directly, the idea is to you think about what you need and you write a test that check that functionality, because there is nothing implemented. The test have to check to fail. Okay. A second step, you will implement the code to quickly or dirty make the test pass, and having, as we have seen before with PyTest, the test passing. And the third step will be like to refactor this and go back to the beginning with the next thing that you want to, next feature or capability of the code that you want to address. Okay. So my proposal is I have the code, a proposal written, but what if you have like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to try to do this assignment?
Yes,
Sounds
why?
like reasonable for you, or is like, well, I have been working the whole day, so I prefer like just consuming Javier's speech. And
Let's see what people says. Please say, sing a sign, send a sign to the chat if you have any thoughts about it. If not, we can continue. You can continue doing it hands-on. If no one is replying, I just want to add something to your diagram. But what I try to do, passing from the red to the green, is to write the less code as possible, and also before in the green status, to write the smallest step as possible. So trying to do really small steps. So you go from red to green. You check if you have to refactor and then to red again, but super small steps. Like then you don't think about all the functionality, but just a small piece of it, and then you go through this loop really quick to be able to make your code evolve with you. So
yeah, good comment. As I said, Codurance is probably one of the places in Barcelona that I have seen the people more committed with good practices. One of the reasons for talking about testing is that in other places, here and also in Germany, where I was more in the data science community, well, there is no culture of testing. Data science field is indeed really horrible in that sense. Because I don't know why there is no tradition culture, and in Barcelona, well, depends on your team a lot, and also the pressure on the project and the stage of the project. So
well, no one said anything.
no one said a word. Okay, so this will be a problem because if I stop, then my fans in YouTube and your fans, Christian, will get bored. So let's try to continue and review the proposal that I have done and check the test, okay, that I have done and why. And at the same time, we can talk about some specification of Python. So my proposal is kind of this.
So what do you think if we start from the test? Like if we were going to write it?
Yeah. So the first test, do nothing. So
that's great.
That's great. So let's uncomment them and go step by step.
Yeah.
So if we go pip run test, okay, we will have this situation, okay, that we cover 33% of the code. Theoretically, we didn't have code at this stage, but it's the current situation, okay. I can think, let me report 1 second, and we will continue. If we go to the HTML report that we have seen before, and we enter the proposal, so this is pretty clear that we are running this, but we are missing all these steps, okay? And this is probably what we want to solve by thinking about the logic. Okay. So what will be the first thing? So we will have one function that has to return a hash of the data. So my first approach will be that data hasher return hash of a given length.
Okay, so
data hasher, I will split the window, okay?
Mhm.
Let me go to the code. Data hasher is the class in charge of hashing, okay?
Okay.
Is where we will define the algorithm, which is this, okay? And we will set the length, okay, in the constructor. And then with the hash method, we will hash whatever message we pass to that class, okay? Do you think for you makes sense, Christian,
Yes.
to procedure this way? Imagine that we didn't have anything below and we just have we just know that we want a class that given a constructor and passing a hashing library and a length, calling the hash method returns a hash.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah,
like
a
good step.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this case, let's scheme or set the test like that. So given the bytes length 2, okay, the length that we are passing to the class is in bytes, okay, but because we are getting hexadecimal at the output, we will need to multiply by 2, okay. So given this length, we call the constructor data hasher with a given length, and we will have our data hasher. So we will have a message that we want to codify. The message itself should be already in bytes, so should be encoded in UTF. So under the test, we have the hash method, okay? Usually, well, there is no much logic in the constructor, so the constructor of a class should not be tested so often. So that's why we go directly to the method hash, okay, which is the only one that has the class. And what we expect is that the hash of this message is of a given length, okay?
You are sorry, you are using bytes because you are thinking in this 32 and 16 length for the hash.
Not really. It's more because the library is accepting only bytes.
Okay.
It's a requirement from a third-party library. Okay.
Okay.
So if we run this pip and run test. Sorry, I didn't save it. I should activate the autosave function. So one test passed, which is bad because I mean it's good, but it's bad because in theory for TDD we should start with the red failing test, but we are kind of fast at TDD. It's like the Fourier transform. So we have one pass, and indeed, if you notice, we increase the cover. So before we had 33, and now we have 48, sorry. So our test is entering in more places within the code, okay, which is good. What about the next functionality, okay, or the next test? So what about this, Christian? You are the referee here. So data hasher called with the same inputs returns two similar results, okay? And this is kind of, I like this example for one reason. what we will do is to call twice to the same function, to the same method, with the same message. And this should return always the same. In the case of hash, this is important because what's probably you have in mind is to use this like a reference instead of using the whole amount to check whether the data changed. You hash the data and you want to quickly know if the data changed comparing two hashes. Okay, so same data should always provide the same hash if you don't change anything else. Okay.
Okay.
And if we run it, we have, sorry, this will be the topic, saving in the file of the whole presentation. So if we run it, we have now two tests passed, but this is really, really cool because the cover did not increase. But the cover did not increase, but we go to the real functionality to test the real functionality that we want. And this is something that you will see around you, people talking about coverage. No, you should have coverage of 80 and you are fine. No. So it's always a good sign to have more coverage, but it doesn't imply the other way around, that having a good coverage certified all the features that you expect in your code. It's only that the code is going into the functions in all the branches of the code, but it's not ensuring that the functionality is there. Okay. So sometimes more coverage doesn't mean better test base in a project. Okay. And this is, I think, kind of interesting to me. And the last test for me will be what happens if data has receive a zero length. Okay. So in this case, I will explain you, and we will see another feature of PyTest. In this case, before we have some length in the message, and we expect to have a hash of a given length, but you cannot have a hash of zero length. And in that case, we should raise a value error. Okay. The way to do that in Python is with this. Okay. I see. So the word with will open a context. Okay. And what we are giving, providing here, is that PyTest expect that you raises in this context this exception. Value error is an inbuilt exception. Okay, Christian and everyone here. So when when the library that we are using receive a zero, we should have this value error. Why this is important? Because it's not an obvious behavior. It's a matter of implementation. Okay. Why? I mean, has a logic, but the implementation could be also valid if instead of launching an exception, returns a non value, for instance, no? Because if you do, zero length means none in some mindset. Okay. So it's important that we have this test here and we save it and we run the test. And the coverage did not increase, but we have 3 tests passing now. In my opinion, despite we have the same coverage, we increase much more our confidence, our understanding on the functionality and the feature of the function of the method that we are addressing. Okay. So last step is in the code. In addition to the data hasher, which is a class, we have just a simple function. Why? Because this is planned to be in a lambda and we want to have it like a function, and I don't know, is the boss order that, and you are okay with that. So, but you can check the handler, receive like an event and a context. Within the within the event, we expect to have a field called country, otherwise country will be known. And what we are doing here is to parse and encode the JSON that we receive as a string. Okay. We have a condition here. If country is Spain, we use the default hasher, which is 16, as the boss mentioned in the specification, which it was here. And if it's Germany, Deutschland, we will have to modify the constructor and pass a length of 32. Okay. If the country is different, we will launch an exception. Okay. This is a summary, but the way to work with that in PyTest will be to define a new class, in this case called test handler. PyTest will not consider test the functions or methods that does not have test before. Okay. So if you don't have this, for PyTest, this is a function that will not be tested. Okay. So the first test case will be like this. No? If you develop, okay, let's try the first. So handler returns has length 16 when country is Spain. Sounds reasonable? Okay.
Sorry, I'm answering to the chat.
No problem, I continue.
Yeah. I just want to ask you a question. What do you think? So I saw that you are using a different constructor depending of the country. And then you have a like default value. If you, I'm thinking if you do this step by step, maybe this will go outside, because you will start with one case, then adding the other, and then you will be able to extract like constants or something to be able to create this constructor and simplify a bit this logic. I don't know if I explain it well. Like instead of having to an if and else, you will have like just one constructor and passing the country to the as a constant, and this constant can be 32, 16, or whatever you want.
Kind of that is what I'm doing in the constructor. So you mean instead of having a constructor, it's like you have a method like set country?
Or a factory or something like this, that it will take that length outside of this scope.
You mean something like this?
Yeah, or kind of factory hasher that where you will pass the country, and then there you will be able to decide what to do with this.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, and I will agree with that. Yeah, this logic doesn't need to be here indeed.
We can continue.
I was expecting to have this with many people coding at the same time, but no, it's really good. It's really good point. It's a matter of responsibility. Probably it's a matter of data hazard to get that responsibility. Depends on create, as you say, a factory, and based on the factory, initialize the data hazard with one or other. To be true, I don't know if that increase or reduce the complexity. Adding a factory in the case that you have
maybe
a different kind of factory, I will probably will agree, like many more cases or different scenarios.
Not at this point, yes. What I wanted to avoid is to have these default values in the constructor that we don't really like. So I was trying to think about how to push it somewhere. So maybe.
So we can. Well, we don't have much time, but
yeah. Well, we can.
It's a good question. I will try to address it in another setting or environment.
Okay.
So, but it's really valid question, and it's important. Going back to the testing, okay. Now 4 tests passed, and we increase the coverage, so we are entering in more places in the code. So far so good. This is nothing fancy, and probably the same kind of thing you want to do it with Germany, no? Like, okay, I have another test case for Germany, I run it, and we will have 90% of coverage, okay? But this is really, we are repeating ourselves a lot for 2 different test scenarios, test cases. So one cool feature of PyTest is that allows us to comment this out and build or set a parameterized test, okay? This will be like the next, sorry, this was not. Instead of having 2 or more test cases just changing the inputs and the expected value, what if we can use in this way? Parameterized is a decorator in which the first parameter will be a comma separated string, okay? Each element comma separated will be an input of the test, okay? As you see, country is here and country length is here, okay? And then the second parameter is a list, and it's a list of tuples that mimic the inputs. So what this is doing behind the scene, behind the curtains, is iterating this test function, and in the first iteration is providing Spain to the country variable and 16 to the country length variable, okay? This is much more convenient, especially, well, this is really easy, but if you have many more countries or more complex situation, this is really handy and helps in the readability of the function, okay? And if we save it and execute it, we will see that we have the same amount of tests passed and the same amount of coverage, okay? Because basically we are testing the same. And just for finishing, we will have to check that the exception that we have in the code here, when the country is neither Spain or Deutschland or Germany, it writes a value error, okay? So if we run it, we will have sys test covering 100% of our lines of codes, okay?
Right, you can create the pull request.
Exactly. It's not because of the coverage, it's because we test the functionality that we think that is important to be documented and to be expressed in this way, okay? As Christian mentioned, and I think it's a good point, we try to mimic TDD, not really, but try to, but TDD workflow is really dynamic, and it really helps in the development of function. To tell the truth, I did not use TDD at all for this. So I had many small mistakes that I was committing, and so if you check the commit history, I will be really ashamed of myself, but no worries. It's not bad, and the point also is that you can you can finally get a good quality of code in the code in different ways. TDD is really efficient. It's really nice. I practice. Indeed, I practice with Christian one. It's really good experience. And if you are really well trained, you will go super fast. So I really encourage all of you to address it. But there are also moments in the project, also in your day, which you just want to keep the test in your mind and have a piece of code that performs the output that you are waiting for. Okay. But it's more risky. With TDD, you really ensure that it's more likely that you cover all the cases because you are going a really methodic way. Okay, these are my 3 cents about TDD. There are many experts in the session today. So any suggestion, as Christian did?
You always need to find the balance between being strictly developing in TDD and being pragmatic. So this just happens by training. So as much as you practice this, you will find when and how to use it better. So that will be my suggestion. Try it and do the smallest things you can think of. Take it, do it in a strictly TDD way, and then try to do it in a faster approach and see the difference and how many mistakes you can have if you go straight to the solution and if you go using the other approach.
Yeah. It's really interesting also, and I will jump to the second assignment, but a series of 4 videos of Martin Fowler and the creator of Ruby on Rails and Ken Beck, the 3 of them talking about the death of TDD 5 or 6 years ago. So it's interesting the open conversation there, but we will continue. So this is about a brand new project, okay? For the second assignment, we will check out and we will go to a different scenario, completely different. What I have here, discard changes. Okay, the second scenario is different and will be more how to deal when arriving to an ongoing project. Okay, and this has to do with this pyramid. The ideal case of this pyramid of testing is to have a large base of unit tests, less integration tests, end-to-end tests. I will not enter in the definition, okay? But we are here generating the base of this pyramid, the unit test, okay? When you arrive to a project that is already there and you have to start implementing test cases for this base code, is quite challenging. So I was thinking that perhaps instead of trying to address in the unit test pyramid, maybe we should go to the Eiffel Tower. Okay, your test will have gaps at the bottom, but well, I mean, the Eiffel Tower is taller than the pyramid, so you can reach a high level of confidence in your code by strategic or tactic testing. Okay, So this is a thought. It's not it's not really a truth, but it's a thought that I wanted to share with you. I have been in legacy projects, or I have to do this, and it's not nice, but it's feasible. So because we don't have much time, this will not be interactive. So what I will do is to explain my approach. Okay.
Okay.
If you take a look to the code, this is much more complex situation. Okay. What this is doing, sorry, we will execute it, ppm run start. And this is providing a service like this. We will open the docs. We will open the Swagger, and this is a REST API that allows you to do some kind of similar thing, hashing, no, based on an input. So you can try this. You can post this body, and you execute it, and what you will get is an event ID and a hash. Okay. You can also try to get all the stored hashes with IDs. Let me create at least two. I don't know, different ones. So you believe me that I am not lying and mimicking. Maybe yes. Who knows? Execute. This work or not? Oh no, we have an unprocessable entity because it's not a valid U.
You would need to generate a valid UUID, maybe.
Let's see. No. I think it's because I add an extra length into the.
Yeah.
I think. Let me replace the last three with.
Yeah.
Okay, now it worked. So if I go to the get all, I should have like two different. Okay. The default ID and the 333 with different hashes. Okay.
Okay.
So, well, take a look at that. You have the main. Okay. The main will start the server. The server and the endpoints of the server are defined in the app. On top, the main also define, let's call it singleton or single instance of a non-DB, non-Go DB. We call it the storage, and storage is defined here in this class. So the application is calling functions that are event handler, delete events, event get all, many of them referring to this file called handlers. Okay.
This is the monolith.
This is the monolith, exactly. This is where to start. No, where is the domain? No. So that's why this could be a really challenging. I mean, this is small, and you know, Christian, this is small. Imagine you arrive to a project not with 5, but I arrived to a project with almost 20 different dot file in the same folder. Each of them, they were like 1,500 files, lines. So it was challenging. Okay. And no test, of course. And no test. What could be wrong? Okay. So yeah, months later, we were problems with payments, with some computations. So, imagine. But okay, this is tough, guys. It's difficult to address this situation. So we will go step by step. Okay. The original plan was to code a bit together, but we are really lacking time. Thank you, Oscar. See you soon. So I have here my proposal. Okay. And my proposal is to go for what is called, or in some places it's called integration. No, it's go to the API layer and try the functionality there. So if the API is working, probably what is inside is working somehow. Okay, and that's why, we set up the test like this. Let's execute test. Okay. So we have right now 3 tests. Okay. There is one test here that this was like a mock. I mean, I didn't want to talk about this. It was something for you to implement it, but let me talk a little bit about this. In Python is relatively now normal to work with coroutines. So PyTest is able to deal with that, with coroutines, but through a plugin called PyTest async IO. So you have to use this decorator, and then you will be able to run the test awaiting like this way without having to use the async IO in more complex way. So this is really, really nice. And I suggest you, encourage you to use it. Another topic I want to talk or to share with you in this is about the fixtures. So PyTest test, if you define this file, conf test.py, will go into this file and will execute it before anything else. And the reason for that is that is usually the place where you define fixtures. Sorry, it's a difficult word for me. Fixture is just a way of calling something that you can run it before a given test run. Why? To fix an environment. So it's like a way of, before anything else, I will set the environment in this place, and then I will somehow inject it by dependency injection into your test, and you can use it. And then if you want, I can yield the value and undone whatever is needs to be undone. For instance, this is useful when you have a imagine that you want to test against a database. This is or a local database. So you will start within the fixture here. Imagine this is the DB, the database fixture. You will put here your non-go DB has a method to start. So you will do it here. Okay. So this yield will return this to the to the test cases in which you use this fixture, and then after ending the test, you will come back and you can, for instance, close all the connections and or clean the memory. Okay, for instance. So probably from previous sessions, you know that I'm really huge fan of Fast API. So Fast API is the framework that provide a really nice API interface, and they provide also a test client. Okay, and this is important in our case because, as I mentioned before, I would suggest in this kind of project to start testing from the API. Okay, so we can use this fixture. Okay, as you see, we have the fixture called API, and if we go to the test proposal, we have the fixture inject it directly in our test. Okay. So if you want to inject here the DB, you just have to do this. Okay. If you don't want to inject API, will be like this. Okay.
Okay.
But because we want, we just need to do this. I think this is really cool syntactic sugar with a mix of nice dependency injection. So take the chance to test it. In this case, we want to check the password endpoint. Okay. And the password endpoint, we just expect to have this is the happy path, by the way, to get a 200, and the body should be like a long body. So if you just try it out and you check what it's doing, well, it failed because the server was not start. If you execute it, you will have a long password here. Okay. So this is what we are expecting. Okay. The second. Okay.
So all these functionalities are providing you the way to set up an environment for testing, like
exactly, it provides
the boundaries, right?
It's providing you an entry point for testing without the need of, let's say, having a real server.
Yeah.
I just implement the get password and also implement get even when existing. Okay. Why? Because this one is going to the database. In this case, the storage, if you check it, is just a dictionary in memory. Okay, it's not Mongo, it's not SQLite, it's not nothing fancy. It's just in memory dictionary, Python dictionary. Okay, but nonetheless, it's a cool scenario, and because you see that the tests are working, you will have to believe me that this will work, or work at home on the assignment. 1 second, I will execute them. So yeah, we have 30 tests. We have the dummy test out here that I showed you before. And we have the 2 proposed tests, which is one addressing the password and addressing the get from the database. Okay. With this test, we got 61%. So I think it's easier to target to this when you arrive to a new project, like work like a consumer of the API and slowly start digging into the base code. That usually the workflow is the other way around. You start from within the model and you start testing the model, and the less, or you don't care so much about the integration test because you are sure that your model is working as you expect. But my suggestion is, in these cases, work the other way around, because you can be sure that the model is doing something, but the model, the DTO still has to travel outside, and during that it has to go from the core of the model to the application and to the interfaces and adapters, and in those changes there could be an error, a change, and despite your test cover the core of the model, you don't find the error. Okay. So last point, last assignment. Come on, guys, we are really close to the end, and you will be free. I will be free, but we will have a nice topic in front of us. So the third assignment is kind of similar, but in this case, I changed the database and I try to use the real Mongo client. Okay. In this case, what we expect is that we will have a Mongo library working together with this service. So somehow you will need a database to code in the way I told you. Okay. To our help comes the mocks or mocking. Okay, the doubles basically. I really like these definitions. I took them from a nice talk from the PyCon 2018. For mocking in Python, we will use the mocking library and a special plugin for PyTest. But it's interesting to know the difference. A mock is an object that records how many times you call to a given functionality. Imagine that you want to record how many times you print in the console. So this will count how many times, for instance. So a stub returns a given data. So it has no logic, but a stub is something that you tell when you are called, just return 3 and it will do, or 42, and it will return that. So the fake is quite interesting, implement fake version of production logic. I will give you a premiere. I would like to talk about fakes and more about this in a blog post soon. A dummy will not do anything, and a spy records and delegates the real thing. Okay, but let's go and check how is it done in Python. If we git check out assignment 3, we will have the kind of similar situation, the super app. But in this case, if we go to the storage, let me close this view and this view and this view and this view, and we go to the config to the storage. You can see that here we are using a real Mongo client. Okay. So if we try to pip run start as before to run the service, and we go to the service and we try to post, what we will have is that it takes some time. Okay, the Mongo client, what is doing in the meantime is trying to connect, but there is no database. So after, I think, 1 minute, it will fail. And we will see the output soon, hopefully. It will fail. So this will make that all of our tests fail. You see, there is a timeout. Why? Because we don't have a database. But think, if you are in continuous integrations, perhaps you run this in a Jenkins or in GitHub Action, you don't want to have a database. Okay, it's impossible. Well, is it really unlikely you want to have this? So what you want to do is to somehow mimic that response, and this is the function and the role of the mocks. So the code is quite similar. That's the only change, and the proposal is also kind of similar. Okay, but let me close here. I will run pip and run test, and we will have 3 pass. Okay, let's go. This one is the same as before. The password is not using the database, so no problem. We have the same as before. Oh, but here we have a problem because this test was testing how to retrieve a hash from the database. Okay, the way of doing this in Python is by using the mocking library. And we are on top of that using the the plugin for PyTest that once it installed, it passes the mocking library as a fixture. As we saw before, we had the API fixture, we have the DB fixture, and we have now the mocker, okay? This is really handy because then what we can do is this. And this is perhaps different in other language, and I will be really glad because for some people it's counterintuitive. The mocker, what it will do is to we will tell to patch a given object, okay? But we have to specify the path to that object that we want to mock.
Okay.
And put attention because we are going to the point in the code within this test case where we are using MongoDB, but we are not going to the storage. We are going to the super app source code handlers. Why? Because the get handler is here, okay?
Okay, so you are mocking just the place where you are using it.
Exactly. That's the key point.
Cool. So you can have, for example, two different mocks for two different places inside the same.
Exactly.
Inside the same test.
Exactly. Exactly. You said perfectly. So the way of so once we do this, we have the MongoDB mock here, okay? And if we run the test, the mock library itself provide this kind of functionalities, okay? It's telling you, okay, mock MongoDB. The function that we are calling is the get event, okay? Okay, but the beautiful thing is that the mocked MongoDB will not fail there, but it will count how many times you call it. So in this simple test scenario, we can say, okay, at the end of the test, tell me, mock, this method, how many times was called or was even called? This is a Boolean, true or false. Okay, and this is pretty cool. Okay, this is in our classification. This will be a mock, a pure mock, because just records the calls of the object. It's not doing anything else. Okay, but we are not happy with that because we know that maybe we have some logic with the value that the database return. So what we can do is the next. We can go here and tell, okay, mock Mongo, I want you that get event return this value. Okay, get event is our method. You can put here whatever, mocked MongoDB, give me bread, and this will be our method, okay? But the return value is a special method of the class, of the mock class, okay? Just telling you that return value is nothing that I invented, it's something that is a method of the class, okay? So, and we are telling it to return this hash, some hash. Then this is quite interesting because then we can expect some value. Instead of just check that it was called, we can now check the body, no? And then we can check it in this way. If we run the test, And if we save also,
You will need definitely to enable the auto save.
yeah, definitely. So let me check. So we have an issue here. Why? Because I was expecting this dictionary. So if I do this and I run it again, so now everything matches. Okay. On top of that, we can not only check whether it was called, but we can check how many times was called. Okay. And we know that it was only one. So this test with 5 should fail. And it's failing, telling us that the result was called only one and we expect 5. So there is a mismatch in that assertion. So we can do this, or we can use this build function. In build function, assert calls ones that will do the same. Okay. So if we
Cool.
Okay, so this is an interesting topic. Okay, mocking, how to mock, or whether one should use a fake. I don't know if you know the difference, but the difference for me between a fake is almost an implementation of your interface, of your adapter to the database, but it's not really connecting to any database. Most of the time do the same in memory, but it's not mocking. It's not something that was never called. It's something that is called, it's following the same flow as a regular call to the database. So this is something I would like to address in a blog or in future sessions.
We have a question in the chat. So Jesus says that my team have had some troubles with the mocking tool. To use a string with the object path to be mocked is hard to maintain. IDI doesn't help with refactors. Do you have any suggestion, best practice to manage it? I guess it's related to what we just said.
To my knowledge, no, and this is also painful to me. And this is really something is counterintuitive. Okay, it's something. To tell the truth, I don't know why it was implemented in this way. Well, I know some reasons for that. Okay, because basically you are using introspection, and then you are parsing that the string and so on and so forth. Not really got the full picture, but some idea. I don't know. My experience mocking in Kotlin is that it's much better. And perhaps, Christian, you can share in JavaScript what is the mocking strategy, or whether it works the same or a different way.
Well, yes, it depends of the testing library, but just offers a way to mock that it's kind of close to this, and there is no perfect option to do the same, because if you want to mock a module, you have to put the string also, so you will need to do a manual refactor. What I suggest in these cases is that a refactor done by the IDI doesn't have to break anything, but in this case, as it's not allowed by the IDI, you will need to change some manual test. So it's something that you will need to handle. There is no perfect way to do it.
As a summary, one thing is we test most of the time when developing, but we don't register those tests most of the time by different reasons. But we should be committed to this. I think this implicit in our profession. So please be committed to this. And the second is that we have plenty of tools in Python, powerful tools. Another day, probably I will talk also about behavior-driven design development, which is, we also have a nice tool, a package called Behave. And the last message is to you. If you feel that want to contribute or want to do any pull request to the repository or any comment, please just open a pull request, any question, any complaint, any suggestion, as Jesus mentioned before, and I will be glad to answer and share my experience with you. And with that, I finish. If any questions,
Thank you, Javier. Well, if there is...
stay tuned, because this year we have plenty of ideas to share with the community. And yeah, you saw already the interaction with people of, I mean, Christian is mainly developing JavaScript, and the interaction between people coding in different languages, I think provides a lot of value. Like the question he wrote about having a factory. It's a pity that this is time constrained and we cannot do like a hackathon or something longer, but you can do a lot from this, and you have our support and our commitment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. So bye, guys.
If you don't have anything else, have a nice end of the week, and see you in the next one.